Congratulations to the producer and director. And Trish, I suppose actually an extra special night for you. This is your hometown film festival, your hometown story, filmed just over the road. How did that feel?
It's a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling to be in this room with these people and hearing all that beautiful talent. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And a big shout out to the other producer, Daniel Schultz, who's sitting here, who's happy to let the women take the lead tonight.
Well, feel free to come up on stage if you feel like it, Daniel, later on. But
I'll throw him a question, don't worry.
I'm curious, how much did Liselle, you and Trish know about opera before you entered into this project?
Well, I knew nothing at all. I came in with the idea of just wanting to have a fresh perspective and just come in. I had an idea of what I thought opera would be. I wasn't a particular fan. I had heard a few of Lisa's singing performances, and Trish kind of brought me on board, and I just thought, let's make a film that is for people who don't know anything about opera and can appreciate the hard work and the whole world of what opera is. And so it was a bit of a discovery for me.
Yeah. And you too, Trish, were you an opera fan? Or?
Well, I was a classical music fan, but I didn't know, and still don't know, a huge amount about opera. But I tell you what, I'm absolutely thirsty to know more and more, and this film has done that for me.
What surprised you most about being taken into the world of opera? For me, the big surprise was the physical nature, the physical demands on the singers. I mean, these incredible voices emerging out of the body. I don't really know how I thought it happened, but it's a physical feat, isn't it? Were you surprised by that as well?
I just want to acknowledge that Rachel and Morgan are sitting here somewhere.
Are they?
They're still here, and they're most amazing voices.
Yes.
So thank you, both of you. It was a huge surprise. I didn't realise the whole physical aspect of it. I mean, when Rachel talks about it being like an Olympic athlete, you don't think about that. You expect someone just to come on stage and sing incredibly without any effort, and yet it's such a physical, it's so physical.
Totally.
So that was a huge surprise, definitely.
Yeah. Look, I think, before I ask any more questions, after watching the documentary, I think it's kind of outrageous that more people don't know about the Lisa Gasteen National Opera School. I didn't know about it. I really hope that this film changes that and that more is discovered about this incredible local institution, internationally renowned. We bring over people from around the world. It's an incredible achievement, isn't it, the school and what it's doing?
It is, and to his credit, it was Jem Sawley who then mentioned to Des Power, who then mentioned to Herman Van Eycken from Griffith Film School, and there were probably other people in amongst that who knew of Lisa and Nancy's work and knew of Lisa's huge stature in the world of opera globally. And that message somehow got to me, and just the serendipity of me saying to Liselle, and we were working on another project, oh, by the way, there's this opera documentary that I need to find the right director. And Liselle said, and I need them to be in London next week. And Liselle said,
I'll do it.
and it really...
I'm also from London, so...
yeah. But if it hadn't been for so many people who are working in this South Bank precinct who had understood exactly what you are saying, that this amazing work is happening and not enough people know that it's going on, that this is where the power of film and film festivals is amazing, because now we've got something that we can go out and tell people about in a way that's accessible, not just those who know, but the broader reach.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Trish, I know about film and I love film, but I know nothing about opera, so I'm a bit more comfortable talking about this as a piece of filmmaking. So, Liselle, when did you know what the film was going to be about? So you have a performance that's the culmination of the film. You have young aspiring opera singers, and you have obviously Lisa, and you film all this stuff. How how do you know
Well,
what the trajectory of the documentary is
the
going to be?
honest answer is, when we began, we didn't know there was going to be a film. So we were interested, and I went to London. I met Lisa and Nancy, and they were very inviting, and they were very warm and wanting me along for the ride. But then we knew there was this whole period of time where there'd be rehearsals, and there was this big performance. And so you don't really know when you begin if there's actually going to be a film there, who the characters are going to be, what the story's going to be about. It was a bit of just a shot in the dark, really. We just thought, let's give it a go. And thankfully, we had certain people like Esteban Rivera, who's here, who came on board with no money, just with faith, because you can't make a film without a camera.
And you can't make a film without a cameraman who's an artist and the gear that the cameraman needs. So that was very important.
Oh, the opening and closing shots, too, the aerial shots.
Esteban.
Magnificent.
Esteban and his drone.
Yeah.
And lots of early mornings.
Very, very early morning.
The things you can do with drones today, I mean, that type of photography 20 years ago would have been prohibitively expensive, I'm assuming, for a film like this.
Well, it would have been a helicopter.
It would have been a helicopter and would have been way more, would have blown the budget out of the water.
Wouldn't we?
Yeah.
One day.
Yeah, beautiful opening and closing shots. I mean, when did you get the sense that this was a film about, as it is, 3 women who are basically incredibly successful, incredibly dynamic, and who are kind of in charge? Because to me, that's what this film is really about. It's about that and about this extraordinary friendship as well.
Well, there's a really missing person here who can't be here tonight, which is Sue Schweikart, who was the editor.
Yep.
And it was working very closely with her that we found the story and what was interesting. Because sometimes you get so close to the characters, you don't actually know what is engaging anymore.
Yep.
I need the outside perspective, someone who's going to come in and be really hard about it and say, this is interesting, this isn't. And so it's a shame she can't be here tonight, but she was, I think, the third person who really brought this film together. And the post lounge that worked really strongly with us. Bronwyn's somewhere out there. Hey, Bronwyn. We had a really strong post house that were also investors in the film, and they gave us a lot of creative license to take a bit of time in making this. Sometimes it takes time to find the story, and you can't do that without a devoted editor who's really there for us. So
yeah,
I think was.
You know, you've been in the film business for a long time, Trish. This is a feature-length documentary, over 90 minutes in length. There's a lot of work that goes into making films like this. To give us an insight into, I suppose, the challenges of pulling this all together and getting to this point where you can screen it at a major film festival.
Well, just for example, the rehearsal and the performance night of Carmen in Concert, we had 6 film crews working simultaneously. Wow. We had another director, shout out to Tani Maguire, who's somewhere here in the film, who was a second unit director. We had probably 20 people. And again, at that point, the film was not financed.
Oh, wow.
So think about that, how much that represents in terms of labour and equipment and faith.
And credit cards.
And credit cards. And a shout out to Griffith Film School and Griffith University, because they kept assisting with some development finance that continued. And then shout out to Joe Dillon from Screen Queensland, where no other major agency would come on board. Screen Queensland understood the sort of perilous nature of whether this film would fall over or not. And yet, even with all the money that they promised us, we could not get access to any funds until we started into the very final filmmaking of this film, which was after, it was kind of the end of last year, and we'd been filming for 2 years before that. So it just shows you the dedication that's required, and every film has a different life, but this film was one of the toughest.
So do you need to provide the funders with rushes, stuff that's already been filmed?
Well, it was some of that, but really, to be honest, Screen Australia, who we believed should have been supportive of this film, were not. And look, it's highly competitive to get films up, but it's very, very difficult to get films about classical music and the arts, because there's no slots on television anymore for big feature-length documentaries. And it was only through our distributor, again a Brisbane company, Antidote, and Gil Scrine's here today, that we were able to find the way to be able to present a case. And so as a result, we got investors in, such as BRH Lawyers. They invested. These are local Brisbane companies.
Yep.
And the Post Lounge put an enormous investment in. So again, I feel like this film is so important. Lisa Gasteen's story is really important. How are these films going to get up unless it takes filmmakers like us who are willing to go out there and take the risk? Fortunately, we pulled it off, but it was quite difficult.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, these are the stories that our industry needs to tell. These are stories about local heroes. I mean, if we have an industry at all, it is to tell these stories.
Queensland stories too.
Queensland stories. It's a kind of a microcosm, I think, the funding and the evolution of this film, of the challenge that our industry faces. Yet, when you look at the bigger picture and you look at the quantity of overseas documentary making that is now swamping Australia through the streaming services, many of these documentaries are fantastic. Magnificently put together productions on formidable budgets. Does it worry you how local filmmaking can compete against that?
Well, that's a whole other story. Let me just say that under the free trade agreement, or the agreement we did with the US back in the early 2000s, we didn't ever put a limit, a threshold of spending by the streaming companies on Australian product. So ultimately, the quotas work on television. They work to some extent on pay television, and we're going to have a battle to try and get Australian content to a point where they can compete. Because this film was done really on a shoestring budget, all things considered, in terms of cash. And yet I think it can hold its own. It's going to go out to international festivals, and yet we will get films that are made for hundreds of millions of people with a lot of money, and they get, they're our opposition. They're taking our slots on our spectrum here in Australia. So yes, I am concerned about it. But you know what? At the end of the day, great stories, great talent like Lisa, great young talent coming through, great talent like Liselle to go out there and make her first feature film like this on faith. That's how great films are made.
And a whole lot of careers get started as a result of this. A whole lot of,
So many people have got their first feature credit on this film. And you know what? The other thing is, it's going out in cinema. So at the end of the day, people will get that beautiful soundtrack, which, came through the QSO, our local wonderful orchestra. And hopefully we can, next year when it goes out into cinemas, support it, tell people about it. And then I think hopefully the ABC might pick it up and Screen Australia might say, well, next time there's a classical music story coming out of Brisbane, we should potentially think about supporting it.
Yeah. I mean, there's some interesting themes in this film. There is the story of Lisa and how her career is cut short, which was the story, as I understood it, that she was injured and could no longer perform. But then there's the other story that emerges of the pressure and anxiety behind getting to that level, the questioning of, my God, I've got the thing I always dreamed of, but do I really want to be here? The loneliness of it. Another one of the themes of what does it take in terms of, is pure talent enough to make it? Or are there other factors like how big you are?
I mean, that really surprised me, because I had this idea of opera, which I think most people who don't know much about opera, just that it doesn't matter how big you are, it's about your voice.
Yeah.
The most important thing is the voice. And yet to hear Morgan's story and to have her just tell me how she's been, the prejudice she deals with, when she's got one of the most beautiful voices.
What a voice, what an incredible voice, yeah.
So it's surprising. It's just part of now the opera industry is part of, I guess, every other sort of arts industry now. And how you look matters. So that was surprising. And I think that was also something that we wanted to bring into the film. That's another story that came up without us realising would be there.
Was that confronting for the people that you were filming? being a documentary maker in some ways, I know you've also been a non-documentary filmmaker as well, there are some similarities with journalism in that you're wanting to get people to open up and say things that perhaps they'd prefer not to say and to not be filmed.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Oh God, I don't know. You build a relationship up with the person, and they either like you and trust you or they don't. You can't force them to say anything. You just have to give them the opportunity and at the right time. And also, I think there's got to be a certain amount of trust and faith that you're not going to abuse that. So my feeling was just spending time with them, trying to spend time, even with Lisa, who obviously had a lot to share about her career. She was so high profile and still is. To share the fact that she was lonely and had anxiety, that takes time. No one's going to just tell you that straight off the bat. So it's just about being around and getting them used to having a camera around too, so it's not just conversations off camera. The camera's there, and hopefully having a camera person who is sensitive and not going to put the camera right in their face, but be on the side of it so you can allow them to feel comfortable.
I thought that was a really important part of the documentary, actually. We're seeing these young singers emerging, going through what it takes to get to the top, and then to see someone who has made it, who's settled down into a different role now, to talk about her own personal experience was just a fantastic contrast. And it reminded me, the ABC at the moment is screening a documentary that features Sam Neill talking about the price of being an actor. And Sam Neill is a very successful actor, but he talks about constant rejection, day after day, of being told that you're not good enough and being rejected. And a lot of these kids who are starting out, young singers, that's going to be what they face, isn't it? Just knockback after knockback.
Also keep in mind another point in the film about the risk they're taking, because many of them will not be able to realise their full potential until they're in their 30s. So they're giving away, in a sense, the best career years, building careers of their lives on the possibility that they're going to succeed. So that's hard as well.
Yeah.
And the fact that the voice changes over time. Our voices are constantly evolving. I never thought about that either. Giving birth, the idea that giving birth changes your voice.
I thought the same thing. I thought, my God, that's pretty full on.
I mean, talking to Manuela, who's obviously a very high-profile agent, who used to represent Lisa, and she was just saying all the things she's got to listen out for, figuring out where they're at with their careers and how their voice might change. And there's so many factors.
How did they handle the cameras being there all the time, filming everything?
We were, as Trish said, we were working on no budget, so we literally had to try and catch what we could at every moment. I know Esteban's a little kind of wary of that, because he's thinking, that should be more in focus. But there's a real fly-in-the-wall feeling of immediacy.
A lot of cameramen here today who were, if Esty wasn't available on a particular day, they would step up, and it's a lot of patience and willingness to hang in there for those moments. And yes, we weren't wanting to intrude, so you do get that sense of what it's like to be there.
Yeah. I think we should take some questions from the audience. I'm imagining many people in the audience have a very direct or one-step removed relationship to this film, so it'd be interesting to hear from some of the people for whom that's the case, or indeed some people who actually know something about opera who may be in the room. But let's pass around the mic and hear from the audience.
Questions for Morgan.
Was that for me? Hi, everyone. We do actually have the Lisa Gasteen National Opera School coming up in November. There is going to be a performance of Die lustige Weiben von Windsor, which is The Merry Wives of Windsor, for anyone who's a Shakespeare fan, and that is on the 29th of November, so come on along. I'll be performing it. I get to play one of the main leads, and I'm very, very excited about that. So, yeah.
Hey, Morgan, while we've got you on the mic, how did you feel about watching the film back?
Pretty awesome. There were a couple of things that were a little intense for me to relive again, and of course, you know, you don't always get to hear what people are actually saying about your audition. So that was that was really, really cool to hear. And yes, admittedly, I was a scatterbrain and still can be. So just putting that out there, Lisa is absolutely correct. But yeah, no, it was pretty awesome. And the question that you asked Liselle earlier about trust and so on, it really was about trusting Liselle. And we really did, I think I can speak for Rachel as well, we really did trust her with our story. And that, I feel like that trust has really been paid back.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. Your voice, wow, it's incredible, fantastic. Anyone else love to, you know, hear some?
First of all, congratulations. Love the film. I guess this is particularly for you, Trish. What do you look for in a good director, or I guess more broadly, a good storyteller, particularly in documentary?
Well, they've got to be incredibly curious to know what it is that they're seeking for. Because at the end of the day, when you start out in a documentary, you can have some pretty good ideas as to what might happen. But if you don't have someone who's incredibly curious, incredibly, I think, empathetic, someone who can be detached when is necessary to be able to have that emotional intelligence, to be able to pull back and try to imagine how the audience is going to experience what it is that they're telling as a story. I think someone who's really got a very strong point of view, who goes out there not necessarily knowing what they're going to achieve, but truly willing to put themselves out there to be able to bring something to the table beyond just saying, oh, I'm interested in what this is. It has to be, they have to be truly invested in the story and in the characters. And to be honest, I didn't know that about Liselle for this story. It was just by chance, really, that we had a conversation about opera. And it just shows you what I knew about her as a director on other projects that we'd worked on and what I knew about her integrity as a person. That mattered hugely. So, yeah. Does that give you a bit of an idea?
Yeah. I think we've got time for one more.
We do.
Yeah. More. Who wants to have a go at asking the final question? Come on, don't be shy. Here we have a gentleman in the front, middle.
Could I ask about the possibility of showing at other festivals, and what about the possibility of commercial release? You need a distributor for that.
Well, we do have a very great distributor, and again, in the way this film has happened, lots of good Brisbane companies have stepped up, and our distributor is planning to put the film out in 2020 in probably about March. It will depend on other films that are coming out at the same time. There is another film that is releasing tomorrow called The Eulogy, which is another classical music film, and I was a producer on that film as well. And so we will be looking at all of the way that film goes out and the way audiences respond and what cinemas support it, and we'll be planning a lot of our film release in March next year based on certain steps that we take around The Eulogy. There was another wonderful film, if you remember, called Mrs. Carey's Concert some years back, and that did extremely well at the box office. So we're going to be targeting music schools, targeting music teachers. Also, obviously, conservatorium, the students, the lovers of music who go and see opera at the cinema where there's those performances. So all of those things are part of the strategy that we're putting together for the film going out into cinemas early next year. Meanwhile, we're hoping, we have some hopes of Berlin Film Festival in February. I don't want to kind of put the mockers on it, but Liselle is an alumnus of Berlin, the talent campus there, and there is, you know, lots of opportunities, Berlin being obviously a place where classical music, and the fact that they might not know that Brisbane has this incredible classical music school. So festivals are definitely on the horizon for the film. And then I think there's the possibility of a broadcaster, potentially the ABC, and potentially a streaming service. I've just done a recent deal with Stan on another documentary, and I'm very hopeful that Stan might be carrying this film later next year. And of course it'll go out on DVD as well. So it is going to be commercialised. It will have an international representative through a sales company. So, you know, these little films, they can come out of nowhere, but they can end up going to many places in the world.
DVD, would that be?
That will come out. The DVD, it's one of those things, you can't have a DVD before the cinema release, otherwise no one will go and see it at the cinema. And we know how this film was made for cinema. So the DVD comes, what they call, it's a staggered release, so sometime later in 2020, there will be DVDs, and you'll also be able to buy the film on iTunes and many other platforms. But I'd love it to be on our national broadcaster. So our next campaign, if you like, is to get the ABC to say that they want to broadcast Love Opera.
And Trish, would they run that
At length?
I know with the Go-Betweens film, they made them cut it back to an hour.
We're not going to cut the film, right?
Yeah,
The film is a work of art at 90 minutes, and the ABC is now rethinking its policy about full-length feature documentaries. I know SBS, I think, has already done that recently, so we're very hopeful that if the ABC does take it, and I do hope they will, it'll be at length.
Yeah.
And we'll give you plenty of notice.
Fantastic.
And
Qantas.
Qantas, absolutely. Well, our distributor's here tonight. He's got all sorts of plans, don't you worry. I think Qantas, can you imagine sitting on the plane, heading to Berlin Film Festival, watching the film? I'd love that.
Yeah. I'm agreeing with the sentiment in the room. It deserves as wide an audience as possible.
Yeah.
Congratulations to both of you.